Right now, it's called the graduation gap. Why are so many Arizona high schools getting A letter grades while graduating students who fail to meet basic state standards? Also on Square Off, why former Republican Mesa Mayor John Giles wants to be Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs' running mate. And Elise Ortiz, one of the legislature's leading progressives, answers 3 questions about John Giles, Abdul Al-Sayed, and erasing Arizonans' medical debt.
I've seen our kids in action, and I know some of them may not test well, but I look at other skills that they have, and I think they can absolutely be successful.
That was the Associate Superintendent of the Yuma Union School District. Derek Bosch believes in his students, but they have a big hill to climb. One of his high schools graduated 91% of its students last year, but just 34% met state standards for language arts. Only 19% met math standards. And here's the kicker. Despite students' poor performance, that high school was rated an A high school in Arizona. So what is going on? What's the disconnect here? A lot to unpack. Our guest researched the graduation gap statewide. Katie Wilcox is a reporter for the Beam.org. Evan Weiloge is data editor for the Beam. Welcome to Square Off.
Thanks, Bram.
Good to see you. I want to let folks know Katie's a former colleague at 12 News, and I've known Evan for quite a while as a journalist here in the Valley. Now you have a new mission, the Beam. Tell us about it.
Yeah, the Beam is it's a new branch for the Howard Center of Investigative Journalism at Arizona State University. We are professional journalists who work with students as interns, and also we are professors of practice at ASU. So we're researching, doing data-driven journalism, and a lot of our work will end up be focused on education for now.
Yeah. And this is the first of many projects we can expect to see from the Beam.
Actually, Evan's had a couple of other things, including some that have aired, but it is the first one that I've got to do.
All right, so check out the Beam.org. Lots of good information there. Let's frame this discussion. There is the graduation gap, high graduation rates coupled with poor student performance on tests, plus the disconnect between performance and letter grades. I want to start with letter grades because that's kind of where the news is right now. You've been covering that, Katie. That's going to change. Those letter grades are going to change.
Yes, this summer an Auditor General report came out really putting additional pressure on changing those letter grades, but at the end of the day, the State Board of Education had already been looking into making those changes for I think those first study sessions happened a year ago. And so they've really been, the State Board of Education has been focusing on what are the things that we're going to do to bring these letter grades a little bit, to just make them matter more so that they're a little bit more transparent so that people can understand what an A letter grade means. Evan, a lot of the research that you did was looking at how the data kind of doesn't play off of what those grades are showing us.
But yeah, what's the disconnect?
Sure, yeah. Well, when you look at the way that the letter grades are calculated, it's a pretty complex formula, and anybody can go on to the state's SBE website, State Board of Education, and look at how that is calculated. But it is pretty difficult to see exactly how it's all going to shake out. There's points for this and points for that. Proficiency is only one factor. Graduation rates are another factor. And then there are also these bonus points. The upshot is that we have seen schools with a wide variety of proficiencies out of their students, including really low proficiency scores, getting really high grades. And we even found that there were some where the proficiency was going down, but their letter grade was going up.
And these are important because a lot of parents look at them and make decisions on whether to place their child in a given school based on a letter grade.
Right, and that is something that's important because only public schools and charter schools are getting letter grades, private schools don't. So that's sort of set aside because private schools actually don't get these letter grades at all, even if students get ESAs. But for the public and charter schools, absolutely, we have 1 million kids in public schools, and their parents do want to know if they're sending their kid to an A-rated school. One of the reasons why the letter grades happen the way they do is, they give this chunk for growth. So if your kids are coming in behind grade level and the class is getting, they're moving through the grades and they're learning, you can get points for that even if the student still fails the state test.
So that 40% success rate on meeting state standards on language arts, that could reflect an actual increase in students' performance from where they were when they entered high school, but still they don't meet standards by the time they leave high school.
It could be, right? So if you come into ninth grade reading, 2 or 3 grade levels behind, and they've risen you up to maybe that 8th grade reading level by the time you leave ninth grade, you might still fail the ninth grade test, right? But you've grown. And then by 11th grade, you may not be hitting the ACT standards, that's our test, but they're showing that they've grown you through the school. So that's where a lot of those points are coming from.
So under this plan revision, will we see fewer A's and more B's, C's, and even D's?
Well, I think that's actually, we were just looking at some of the video from the latest meeting, sitting in that meeting, that was a big concern because they don't want to have something that's only tied to proficiency. That's really important for a lot of the districts there. And they are concerned that if we leave here, I listened to at least one person talk about, I voted for this thing, and if I have to go back and say, hey, this many schools aren't going to be A-rated schools anymore, that can be a big problem for their community because the school hasn't changed, but the grading system has. So they're really working with how are we going to best reflect what schools are actually teaching.
So we'll keep an eye on that. Let's move on to the graduation gap and some of the research you did, Evan. In 2025, let's put that graphic up, 80% or 4 out of 5 Arizona public high school seniors received diplomas. That's pretty good. But just 40%, 2 and 5, met the state standards for proficiency in English language arts. Only 30% met the standard in 11th grade math. Here is where it gets rougher. Among lower income students, the graduation gap is even wider. 80% graduate, but only 27% are proficient in language arts, just 18% in math. So the graduation gap you found is also an income gap.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is something we've seen for as long as we've been looking at these kinds of numbers. It turns out that socioeconomic status, basically, are you well off or are you low income, has a really big determining factor on how your proficiency scores are going to come out. And we see that the graduation rate is about the same, so about 4 out of 5 students, whether they're low income or not, are graduating. But we see that for low income students, those proficiency scores are about half of what the other students are.
And so we talked about the downstream issues, the students coming into high school with these, falling
Right.
short of meeting standards. Now you see the layer over that, the income issue. How is that being dealt with?
Well, that plays an effect on the letter grades as well, right? Because if you were to assign a letter grade mostly on proficiency, knowing that proficiency reflects poverty, what you'll end up seeing and what the state board experts what they were told is that you're going to see lower letter grades on lower income schools, which can create sort of a cycle. Because right now in Arizona, we have an open enrollment, so people might leave. Money follows students. That could mean you get even less funding for an already lower income school, right? So that is part of the concern that they're talking about in the State Board of Education meetings. But it's also, you talk about the downstream effects. If you are a low income student who's not getting the kind of education that you really need to be successful, and you're not meeting those sort of bars that we want to give and say these are going to be our standards. If you want to go to college, are you going to drop out and be saddled with debt? Are you going to have the same career opportunities as other students? I mean, we really want to see, I think what everyone wants to see is just better education standards across the board and help kids meet those standards.
And the help, talk about the help, because I know some of the people you interviewed said, the legislature is not doing enough to help.
Yeah, I think there were a number of people, most people we talked to are concerned, and that includes, Tom Horn said that he thinks teacher retention is one of the biggest problems that we have. And that could mean that we're not paying teachers enough and we're not giving them enough supports to make sure that they're developing their own skills as being teachers and staying through and beyond those first couple of years when things can be really hard.
So let's put this all in the context of the current K-12 environment in Arizona and public schools' never-ending battle for funding. Could these new grades accelerate an exodus from public schools?
Well, with the open enrollment system, like Katie was saying, those letter grades, they have a big influence for parents. I mean, you talk to any of these parents out there and they'll tell you that they look at that letter grade, they don't really examine it very hard because they believe that that's indicative. And if you drive around the valley, you'll see the schools that post that big A on the side of their schools. And if you end up with schools getting B's, C's, or even lower, and it's because of those proficiency standards, then we could see that kind of exodus, just like you're talking about.
How soon can we expect a decision from the Board of Education?
They will have their first vote and consideration later this month, and they're hoping to have the bigger vote in September. But I mean, ultimately, the way that the State Board of Education and this task force that's advising them, they really want to see the changes by January.
By January. Could be a really big deal and probably an issue in our superintendent's race going on right now. Katie Wilcox, Evan Weiloge of thebeam.org. Thanks so much for joining us. Great work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You can now watch Square Off on Sundays and Fridays. Catch us on 12 News at 2:30 p.m. Friday and at 8 a.m. Sunday, or watch us on the 12 News streaming app at 2:30 and 7:30 p.m. Friday or 8 a.m. Sunday. If you miss a show, it will be on the app. When we come back, what one of the leading progressives in the state legislature has to say about progressive victories this summer and defeats in the last few weeks. Plus, we're learning why Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs' apparent pick as her running mate, a former Republican mayor, decided to get on board. Stay with us.